Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and yes, that's right. We're back. We're back with the Truth Attack. Okay, so we got a news cycle that's just moving as fast as lightning here. I guess we just better get right into this. We are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the network operating and the broadcast coming. So, if you enjoy the shows, the information, the discussions, the lectures, the guests on the other shows, we sure would appreciate it if you could find your way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website, if you're not there listening online now, and get yourself signed up as a subscribing member, even if it's as little as $10, $20 a month. Every membership helps, and we do need your support to keep operating. And if you want to get fully informed and educated on the federal income tax and why the IRS and DOJ enforcement operations and arguments are now exposed as being the unconstitutional fraud they have always been, you need to find your way over to tax-freedom.com and start reading, or find your way over to irszoom.com and pick yourself up a copy of The Simple Truth About Income Tax version 2 for just $6. I'm just completing that second version now, and it'll be posted up on that website in a couple of days, and it exposes both, of course, the original income tax legislation, which was a foreign tax enacted under a tariff act, the Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act of October 3rd, 1913 specifically, and 105 years later, it exposes the consequences of Donald Trump's new tax law, signed into law in December of 2017, made effective as of January 2018, where Congress declares that the constitutional authority for the income tax is not the 16th Amendment, which is what the government has been telling you and the lower courts have been deciding for 65 years, erroneously, wrongfully, and communistically. Because a heavy progressive graduated income tax is the second plank of the Communist Manifesto, and you don't find graduated taxation in the Constitution, which requires taxation of the people to be uniform. So, The Simple Truth About Income Tax, version 2, exposes the whole fraud. Congress said the constitutional authority for the tax in 2017, they said the authority is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. Well, that clause only contains the power to tax by impost, duty, and excise. Imposts tax foreign activity, duty taxes exported goods, and excises tax commodities, licenses, and corporate privilege. So where's the authority to tax labor of the American people, exercised by right? It doesn't exist. It has never existed. That's why the government has had to defraud the American people and argue that it is the 16th Amendment that authorizes the income tax on your labor as a direct tax without apportionment. But that's a fraudulent argument, and that fraud is now exposed in law on the congressional record by the enactment of the new tax law. It is, of course, fraud, because it's absolutely impossible for the 16th Amendment to create a new power that would be enforceable in the courts, because there is no enabling enforcement clause in the amendment to constitutionally authorize Congress to write law for a new tax, or a new taxing power allegedly created by the amendment. And since before the amendment, all direct taxes had to be apportioned to the states for collection, and now they're claiming, after the amendment, and as a result and as a consequence of it, that direct tax can be imposed on your labor without limitation. Well, obviously, that would be a new power to tax. Therefore, in order to be able to enforce with law a new power to tax allegedly created by the amendment, there would have to be an enabling enforcement clause in the amendment to constitutionally authorize Congress to write law, because that's an essential and irreplaceable element of establishing subject matter jurisdiction, i.e. the authority of the federal court to act, to enforce the claim based on the 16th Amendment and a new power instead of being based on Article 1 and the taxation by impost of foreign activity, by duty of exported goods, and by excise of commodities, licenses to sell commodities, certain licenses, and the corporate privilege, where it is the privilege that is the subject of the tax, not the earning of money. And citizens don't earn money by virtue of a corporate privilege. And this is how they bamboozle you, by telling everyone as a person and then failing to recognize the distinction between the citizen's right to earn money and the corporation's privileged basis for earning money that makes everything the corporation earns taxable regardless of source based on the corporate privilege. But citizens can only be taxed on the earnings that are derived from an activity subject to an impost, duty, or excise. If you don't engage in any of those taxable activities, you owe no tax on your earnings, on your labor, on your rent, on your interest, on your dividends, on your capital gains. It doesn't exist. It's unconstitutional. The tax applies to the gains earned by corporations as privileged persons. They do not apply to earnings earned by citizens by right through the simple exercise of the right to work or to buy and sell property. The federal government has no authority to tax in those arenas, and it never has. The original income tax was collected from foreigners, not citizens. There is no new tax imposed in 1945 with respect to the income tax. And none of the money collected or paid by citizens sent in either by the employer after withholding or with the Form 1040 on April 15th, none of that money goes in the U.S. Treasury to fund the operation of the federal government. Every single penny goes to the Federal Reserve Bank, a private corporation. You want proof? Get the last check you sent to the IRS with the Form 1040, get a copy of it from the bank, both front and back, turn it over and read the endorsement. See who cashed the check. If it was tax that you paid, it will say deposit to the U.S. Treasury. How much do you want to bet it doesn't say that? I'll bet anyone $10,000. Their check doesn't say that. What it says is paid to any FRB, Federal Reserve Bank. Why is a private corporation cashing your so-called tax check? Taxes are money for the government to spend, not the Federal Reserve Bank to hold or have to collateralize $36 trillion in debt. There's a law that actually says that, Title 26, Section 7609, which says every penny collected as tax must be deposited into the U.S. Treasury, of course, because if it's not in the Treasury, Congress can't write appropriation bills against it and spend it. If it's over at the Federal Reserve Bank, instead of being able to spend accumulated revenues, Congress has to borrow another $1 trillion from the bankers, and it goes to 37, 38, 39, 50, and counting. Right? Because there aren't any tax revenues accumulated. They're all being held by the Federal Reserve Bank, specifically to force the government and the American people to borrow another $1 trillion to operate, to function, to help disaster-stricken areas, to fund war, to defend ourselves, to process immigrants. So, the whole system is a fraud. It's been a fraud since the end of World War II, when they created the system of collection by allowance rather than mandate, and deceived the American people into asking for it and allowing it on Form W-4s by, instead of claiming exempt, which you're entitled to do by law under Section 3402N, that's Nancy. Instead of claiming exempt, they wrote single and zero, or married and four, and that automatically triggered a withholding of income tax, which created a presumption of subjectivity to the tax, when in fact there was no subjectivity at law, there is no tax imposed, and it's unconstitutional to try and apply and enforce a direct tax on the labor of the American people under the 16th Amendment. And it's been a fraud since 1950 when they started doing it. And now Donald Trump's tax law exposes the whole thing. So this system is going to die. And the American people need to wake up, or you're going to get stuck with an even worse system. We need to throw away the income tax in its entirety. It has been destructive, and it allows the corporation to escape taxation by artificially increasing their expenses so that they don't have any profit. But who wants to invest in that? So the link from Main Street to Wall Street is broken because Main Street thinks Wall Street is a casino. It's not honest. It's all rigged accounting, manufactured excessive expenses to avoid tax. And because the corporations are allowed to do this, the upper bureaucracy of the corporations live like kings, like aristocrats, like preferred royals of the court, without actually being royalty or having the labels associated with that. And by escaping taxation, the corporations compel Congress and the IRS to do what's happened, shift the entire burden of the tax system onto the backs of labor under a fraudulent claim that the income tax is a direct tax under the 16th Amendment, and anyone who says different is making a frivolous argument. Well, they're the ones with the frivolous argument. And you can prove it now with the congressional record associated with the declaration of the constitutional authority statement for the new tax law in 2017. November of 2017 was the publication of the statement. December was the enactment, and January 1, 2018 was the start of the new law. You're now no longer under any operable claim that it's the 16th Amendment that taxes you. So somebody explain to me how we're subject to an impost on foreign activity as citizens working in the state. The original income tax law only collected tax from the salaries and wages of the non-resident aliens. That's Code Section 1441B. Salaries and wages aren't in Section 61. That was done by judicial legislation. Judges rewriting law for Congress to effect the communistic enforcement of the tax rather than a constitutional enforcement of it. It's an unconstitutional system of taxation. It's an unconstitutional system of currency. The Federal Reserve Bank is unconstitutional. The income tax is a direct tax, is unconstitutional. It's never been declared by the Supreme Court to be as such. There's been a judicial rebellion in the lower courts that's been ongoing for 60 years that for some reason the Supreme Court allowed to go on. And of course, this all came out of the same era that gave us the bad decisions of Roe v. Wade, affirmative action, and regulatory deference, all of which this Supreme Court has properly stricken down. And the income tax needs to go as well, because this is why the American people have been divided. This is how it's been done. This is how they've created the class warfare that is burning America down and dividing the people right down the middle, all across the country. Because they think different laws can be applied to different classes. So let's write law for the rich. You idiots. Whenever you allow different law to be written for the different classes, guess what happens? Yeah, that's right. The rich own everything. They write the law. The law ends up oppressing the poor, not taxing the rich. Wake up. Everyone has to be treated exactly the same under the law, regardless of race, color, national origin, language, gender, age, and wealth, productivity, or level of income. I'll be back in 5. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network, and let's just get right back into this. As I was saying when the commercial break came up, we have an unconstitutional tax system and an unconstitutional currency system, and we need to replace it because the income tax is destroying America by dividing the people and unifying it. And dividing the people, it's divided our politics. It's made it impossible for any single politician to represent the whole of the American people. They have to pick one class or the other to represent and then join the class warfare. And all this does is set the people at the throats of one another and keep them distracted while the political class loots the treasury and enriches themselves and their cronies and business partners, all at the expense of the people and without representation. So you need to get rid of the income tax so that we can get back to a constitutional system of taxation that taxes the corporate subjects in legitimate activities, legitimately subject to federal tax by imposed duty or excise. And the way to do that is to get rid of tax on profits. This just lets the corporations lie and makes everybody become deceptive about what business they're doing. The government has no business asking for you to make a full disclosure of everything you've done all year long. You have a constitutional right to be secure in your papers. Those are your financial transactions and records in 1778. Wake up, 1788, 1776. So, what we need to do is get rid of the tax on profits and instead tax corporate earnings. Not at 40%, but at 4%. Not once a year, every month. Every single month, every company and business in the country sends in 4% of the excise tax on the corporate privilege, on the business privilege, 4% of everything earned by the business, and at the end of the year they make a filing to consolidate the earnings across the course of the year and make a final payment or get a small refund if they overpaid the 4% for the first 11 years in the final accounting. No expense deductions. You want to artificially inflate expenses? Go explain it to your shareholders without having tax avoidance as the reason for the inflated expense. You don't want to have any profits? Explain it to your shareholders. Let's make the companies manage themselves honestly. Let's see who's profitable and who's not. And I think the share prices on the market will begin to reflect that reality once accounting is taken out of the equation. Because that's what it's all been based on, false and fraudulent accounting. So you need to raise revenues from legitimate sources. The money's collected from every single business across the country at 4% every single year, every single month, and sent in becomes the monthly budget that the government has to learn to live within. And so you replace the income tax with a tax on the earnings at 4%. Every month they send it in. All the businesses become meaningful participants and contributors to the Treasury on a monthly basis. And now government has to learn to live within that budget. So you have to means test Social Security, means test Medicare recipients. People who are wealthy shouldn't be getting services or money for free from the month if they don't need it. Social Security is a welfare net intended for widows and orphans, we were told in 1938, 39, 40. Widows and orphans. No, it's not become an entitlement for the wealthy, the upper middle class, who are consuming the resources, leaving insufficient amounts to be distributed to the poor who actually need it. Stop giving money to people who don't need it and who are wealthy. Means test the programs. You need to set a level where if you're wealthy enough to take care of it, if somebody's got $500,000 in gross net worth, assets minus debts, they should be paying for it, not America. And then the real problem, of course, is you have to cut the government. You have to stop spending. Why do we have a Department of Agriculture? This is managed by 50 different states, not the federal government. Agriculture isn't in the Constitution. Why do we have a Department of Labor? Labor isn't in the Constitution. This came out of the Depression. Actually, it came out in 1913 with the income tax to start collecting money to collect labor. Why do you have HUD? Housing isn't in the Constitution. Medical, Medicare, medicine, health care, health and human service, that's not in the Constitution. Energy, not in the Constitution. Education, not in the Constitution. Every single one of these federal agencies needs to be eliminated 90% or substantially reduced by 90% and incorporated into a single agency. Maybe keep the Department of the Interior, but all of these: Interior, Agriculture, Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services, HUD, Transportation, Energy, Education, every single one of them, EPA and OSHA, every single one of them needs to be eliminated. These are not legitimate federal activities. You got to get rid of 90% of these operations, reduce them, and put them all into one office inside one which you keep, maybe the Interior, instead of getting rid of it. It's been around since 1849. So put all of these others, reduce them 90%, and make them offices in the Department of Interior. Now you cut the government spending by 30%. You're raising revenues legitimately, which will stimulate the economy. You've reconnected Main Street to Wall Street by giving them honest accounting and letting them know who's making money and who's not, so they can buy stocks based on intelligence decisions rather than the wind or the voices in the wind. You need to eliminate government agencies. You need to means test your welfare programs being used to buy votes from the frightened old people and the impoverished poor who were constantly promised more and always delivered less for a whole bunch of reasons, starting with corrupt politics on the Hill and ending with inflation degrading the purchasing power of the dollars they are given, so that even when they're given more, it's still less and less sufficient to improve or meet the quality of life desired or enjoyed in the past. So we've got real problems here, and the indications are everywhere. It's on the streets, it's in the markets. You have two parallel existences. Wall Street is booming and even recovering nicely when it falters, while Main Street is struggling to borrow a dime and running out of money, maxed out on credit cards, $36 trillion in debt, can't get access to loans because of the inverted yield curve. The Federal Reserve Bank is behind the curve, doesn't know what's going on. It can't lower interest rates now, or it will be seen as being political to try and help the Democrats. And that, of course, will trigger another run of 4,000 or 5,000 points on the stock market to 45,000, even bigger balloons. So Main Street's in trouble because of the inverted yield curve, the lack of access to the capital. The Federal Reserve is pushing the middle class down into the poverty levels and elevating the wealthy class into the elite. They're creating a two-class society: elites, rulers, and impoverished peons and serfs. And it's all based on the federal income tax, which has convinced Americans it's okay to have different laws for different groups of people. So, who do you put your faith in? Government or God? Freedom comes from faith in God. What comes from putting your faith in government? That's right, betrayal, enslavement, peonage, war, destruction, and death. Go ahead. Put your faith in government instead of God. See what happens. God's true plan for mankind is freedom. Freedom achieved through faith in God, and only God delivers freedom when you put your faith in He rather than government. Trust not in man, or you will be betrayed. So, the truth is what will lead you to freedom. So you need to learn and understand the truth about all of these things that I'm relating and talk about on my show every week. Okay, so let's talk about current events a little bit, right? Well, we got, a little bit of time left. So, how corrupt is the mainstream media? This is simply unbelievable. For 3.5 years, they covered up the fact that Joe Biden had Parkinson's, onset dementia, and was incapable and incompetent of leading the country. For 3.5 years, they covered it up. And then, when it gets exposed, and Joe has to step down because he's not competent to run for office. Oh, well, there's a surprise. I've been telling you that for 3 years. But hey, if he's not competent to run for office, how is he competent to serve in it now? And obviously he isn't, is he? Because where's Waldo? Where's Waldo? He's gone. He never talks. He hasn't talked to the American people in 3.5 years. All they've done is spin nonsense and lies out of the White House press briefing room by first Jen Psaki and then Karine Jean-Pierre. Two biggest propaganda mouthpieces in the history of American politics. Both pathological serial liars, incapable of speaking the truth or even knowing it. Now, the corrupt media is covering up for Kamala. Can you imagine being elevated to the position of running for president and not holding a press conference? Welcome to the world of Kamala. No questions, no press conferences, no reporters, only Democrat Party events. Never, ever any sort of adversarial confrontation will be allowed. Today she's hiding behind Girl Scouts on the tarmac to prevent any reporters from yelling questions to her about her history or about Walz's history, her VP pick, the most progressive, radical governor in the country. This is an outright socialist party ticket now. Welcome to the party of Bernie Sanders. The Democrat Party has now been completely and totally co-opted by the socialists. Bernie Sanders is calling the shots. There is no more moderate, middle Democrat Party. This is the extreme radical left and all of its positions with critical race theory and transgender dysphoria and green energy and no petroleum and expensive energy and open borders and crime and immigrants and budget priorities going to the immigrants to buy their votes. Since the Democrats have decided they can just assume that the black vote will go back to voting Democrat because they put a black woman at the top of the ticket. Oh, but she's not black, she's Indian. She's never professed to be black in her entire life. She's always said Indian, Indian, Indian. Indian and Asian, never black. But now they want the black vote. So surprise, the pandering giggler is suddenly black. So if you're black, you better vote for her or you're not black, right? Right? That's what Joe would tell you, right? Well, that's what Kamala is telling you too. By suddenly switching from Indian to black. And the media is covering it up. No interviews, no press conferences, no questions, and no policies. No policies. This woman hasn't made one statement in 3 weeks about what she's going to do or wants to do. No policies. Everything is Trump bad, Trump bad. Ooh, MAGA bad. Yeah, Make America Great Again is bad. That's what these seditious, treasonous Democrats believe. Make America Great Again is bad. If you're a Democrat, you better start thinking seriously about what you think you're voting for. We'll be back in 5. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and let's go ahead and finish this up. You know, when I sat down today, I really wasn't ready to go. I had been working on a rewrite of my book the whole day, and I wasn't sure where we were going to go. I was going to review the history of the Biden administration, which I started to try and do a few weeks ago and didn't get very far into it, and I'm not sure we have enough time to get into that. Maybe we'll just read some more from that anyway. You know, for 3.5 years, it was Joe. He's competent, he's sharp, he's on his game. Oh, he just had an off day. And then, when it was exposed that he wasn't competent, that he never was competent, that he has Parkinson's and onset dementia, never should have been in the White House in the first place. Then the Democrats pulled a silent coup. They pulled a silent coup. They threatened Joe with the 25th Amendment, forced him to resign after insisting right up to the day, Joe, go, he's competent. And then they forced him out and replaced him with someone who didn't get a single vote and has never gotten a single electoral college vote. And then they put her up without asking her any questions, without holding a press conference, without speaking to the American people to explain the silent coup, without the president appearing, without the new president alleged nominee appearing. They hid Joe in the basement for 3 years, and now they're trying to hide Kamala because she's a disaster. She can't speak. She's a giggler. She doesn't know what's serious and what's not. And she's a pandering idiot, just like Joe. They'll say anything in front of the crowd they happen to be speaking to pander to that specific crowd. And most of what they say is a lie. She's saying, I'm going to make abortion a permanent right. Well, you going to pass a federal law on abortion? Tell me, Kamala, how you going to do that, you idiot? You moron? The Supreme Court just said it's not a federal issue. It's state law. You can't pass a federal law doing anything. It replacing the states' rights. Only a case can strike down a particular state's implementation of certain law restricting, read to be a violation of rights somehow. But the federal government can't write law. That's a lie. Oh, we're going to make abortion nationwide, protect. Liar! You can't do that. And what does she advocate for? Higher energy prices. Let's eliminate gas and oil. That's what she wants to do. No fracking has been her historical position. Now they're denying it. The pandering idiot. She's walking back every single policy statement she's ever made in her life. Suddenly she's not for bailing out the criminals or raising the theft level to $1,000 before we'll arrest and prosecute. Now she wants to prosecute. Now she's the prosecutor. Liar! Pandering liar, pathological serial liar. She supports the critical race theory teaching in schools. She supports the transgender dysmorphia. She supports men beating up girls on the athletic field. She supports men winning the state championships, the national championships, and the gold medals. She supports rewriting Title IX to allow psychologically disturbed men to compete with little girls. She supports open borders, immigration, budget priorities for the immigrant. She supports allowing criminals to operate with impunity. They're allowing the cartels to take over and run the inner cities. The cities of America are beginning to all look like third world war zones, with people defecating in the streets, sleeping on top of it, drug addiction, needles in the parks. This is what the Democrats have done in the cities, and that's their plan for the nation. There is no moderate Democratic Party left. It's been co-opted by the far left radical wing, the youth, which supports, surprise, the terrorists in the Middle East, Hamas. They support Hamas. They label it Palestine, but that's Hamas. They don't support Israel defending themselves from 1,400 people being murdered in a terrorist attack. Oh no, that's not the problem. The problem is Israel responding in a manner strong enough to try and get rid of the problem permanently. This is what the Democrat Party has become. Crime, open border, high energy costs. And this is being done intentionally. Remember, Joe Biden and the Democrats, which Kamala is a part of the ticket, this is Democrat policy. This wasn't Biden by himself. And this is what Kamala will continue to do. They intentionally on day one, opened the border and started this wave of immigration. And they intentionally increased the price of gas and diesel, which cascaded into increased utility costs, which cascaded into increased product prices on every product and every shelf in every store in every city and every state in America. Inflation. And if they turn off the gas more and shut down more under 4 more years of a Democratic administration, it'll drive this country into a depression. And I've been telling you for a couple of years now, you're in a recession. You've been in a recession since we had 2 consecutive down quarters and the Biden administration came out through Karine Jean-Pierre and said, oh, no, that's not a recession. We're redefining it. And everybody in the mainstream media went along with it. The hell is wrong with you people? 2 down quarters is a recession and you've been in it since. It's because of the inverted yield curve. Idiots. You can't get access to money, economy declines. All the printed money ended up on Wall Street pouring into the stock exchange, just like it was depicted in the editorial cartoon from 1913 that I've talked about, put up several times, and have on the website, taxfreedom.com. This was all predicted 110 years ago. Of course, it wasn't that hard for them to predict, was it? They understood what was going on. It's the American people who have been asleep ever since, and they've been victimized by ever since the Depression, which was caused by the monetary system and its abuse and turning control of it over to a private corporate bank, which engineered the collapse, used the opportunity to buy up all the farmland in America and consolidate it under 6 corporate operations that now control food around the planet. That's the first thing they used the control of the money supply to do, was to take over worldwide food distribution. And of course, then they funded the Nazis. And you see where that took us, right? So the Federal Reserve Bank is the entity running this country. The White House is just pushing political slide further and further to the left with these radical communistic policies they've been implementing. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about when I say communistic, you need to go and review the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, because they contain things very clearly and simply, like number 2, the income tax, graduated taxation. 5, the Federal Reserve Bank. 10, centralized control of public education. 6, 7, and 8, Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Labor, all controlled by the government. They've been enforcing socialist communism, not capitalism. Capitalism, what's the difference? Well, it's right there in the name. Capital, It's not just a competition, free and open competition for goods and services. It's supposed to include a free competition for capital, not a monopoly on it, controlled by one entity that sets the interest rates for all ventures and all borrowers. There's supposed to be a competition for capital. By giving them a monopoly, you destroyed capitalism. What you have now is a quasi-socialist capitalism, controlled not by a free market, but by one institution that has engineered since its existence a repeating cycle of boom and bust, over and over and over again, created by errant policy. It's been a destructive force and a seditious one, as it has funded more and more the socialist conversion and destruction of the Constitution rather than its defense and preservation. The mainstream media has become the enemy of the American people. The federal judges of the lower courts have become the enemy of the American people. The Democratic Party has become the enemy of the American people as it pushes, as more important, its agenda. And this guy Walz, as I said, is a self-described progressive. Nancy Pelosi comes out and says, oh no, he's a moderate, he's from middle America. You lying, pathological, serial liar! He was asked. It's on record, it's in video. You can Google it and find it, it's really easy. He was asked, are you a moderate or a progressive? Oh, I'm a progressive. And he sure is. His policies are far left. Climate change, CRT, transgender dysmorphia, open borders, foreign budget for foreigners, war in the Ukraine, endless war, and supporting, that's right, the terrorists in the Middle East, Hamas. And the mainstream media is not questioning them, not forcing them to speak on policy or past history or policy position. They're allowing them to just pander away while denying all of their declared previous policy positions. This is the same corrupt media that covered up for Joe Biden. They had no problem at all switching from Biden to Kamala. You would have thought, after being embarrassed about lying to the American people for 3.5 years, that they'd want to make amends and show that they can be honest. But oh no, they're demonstrating they can never be honest, and that means they're your enemy. Because they're not reporting the news, they're pushing their agenda and hiding the news, hiding the facts, hiding the law, hiding the Constitution, endorsing its destruction under the guise and pretense of popular opinion, which the media can always create the appearance of a majority, which is why they always yell, democracy, democracy, democracy. It's not a democracy, it's a constitutional republic. The majority doesn't rule. The law is supposed to control everyone equally, uniformly, and treat everyone the same, not differently based on the class you belong to and how much money you earn or don't. The whole system is socialist communism, not constitutional government, not constitutional taxation, not constitutional law enforcement. And the courts have become the enemy of the American people, right along with the mainstream media. The judges are destroying America by their refusal to address the Constitution. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. I'm pretty sure I hear the commercial break coming up. I'll be back next week with more. Get over to taxfreedom.com, get educated. Get over to libertyworksradionetwork.com and get signed up. Very good. Stop.